The Serbian people suffered tremendously during the Second World War, be it at the hands of the Ustaša, the Croatian ultranationalists, or at the hands of the German. In this video, we're going to talk about Serbian collaboration with the Germans in occupied Serbia. Keep watching. By the eve of the Second World War, Yugoslavia was far from a stable state. It was created after the First World War under its initial name Kingdom of Serbs, Croats and Slovenes, where basically Serbia was ruling over the other South Slavic nationalities. In 1929, King Alexander I abolished the constitution and the country became a royal dictatorship. This was in response to the assassination of politician Stjepan Radić in parliament. Alexander himself was assassinated in 1934 when visiting France. His son Peter was too young to rule, so Alexander's first cousin Paul became the Prince Regent of Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia was in a precarious situation when 1941 came around. By that time, Germany dominated most of Middle Europe. Britain and the US urged the country not to sign an alliance with Germany, but looking at Yugoslavia's geographical position, things were not looking favorably if it wanted to resist Germany, and thus on the 25th of March, Yugoslavia signed the Tripartite Pact to join the Axis powers. See, Hitler wanted to use the country's rail network to capture Greece. Then, on the 27th of March, Serbian military leaders seized power in a military coup in Belgrade, denounced Paul and put 17-year-old Peter on the throne. Hitler then vowed to destroy Yugoslavia. On the 6th of April, Orthodox Eastern Sunday, the Germans launched Operation 25, also known as Operation Punishment, the Axis invasion of Yugoslavia. It started with a massive bombing campaign of the capital city of Belgrade. Large parts of the city were destroyed and thousands of lives, both military and civilian, were lost. This disrupted communication and the Yugoslav ranks were thrown into chaos. As historian Robert Cetino puts it, it is no exaggeration to say that Operation Punishment had won the Yugoslav campaign in the first 20 minutes. With minimal losses, the Germans took over the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. They were assisted by Hungarian and Italian troops. A German officer called it more of a military parade rather than a campaign. Yugoslavia was then partitioned. The large part became known as the NDH, also known as the Independent State of Croatia, which was an Axis puppet state where the Germans and the Italians wielded great influence over. What happened to Serbia? Well, what was left of Serbia, since pre-war Serbia lost territory left and right. But what was left of Serbia came under German military administration. The Germans, they wanted to control Serbia's resources, metals like lead, antimony, and copper. Also, they wanted to control two vital transportation routes, the Danube River and the rail network that connected Central Europe to Bulgaria and Greece. From the get-go, the Germans imposed a strict regime on the Serbian people. The death penalty was established for acts of violence and sabotage, especially of communication lines and public utilities. Street meetings were banned, as were demonstrations without previous permission and the distribution of leaflets. All work stoppages, strikes and lockouts were prohibited. The first puppet government was established on the 30th of May 1941 and named Commissioner Administration, led by Milan Nedić. It lacked any semblance of power and cannot be compared to the, well, perhaps not so independent state of Croatia, which had some sort of autonomy. Serbia did not have this at all. That summer, armed resistance increased, and by August 1941, 246 different rebel attacks had been carried out. Despite harsh measures such as shooting hostages and burning down villages, resistance continued. German military commander in Serbia, Heinrich Dankelmann, asked for reinforcements. However, by now, Germany was waging an all-out war in the USSR, and therefore no reinforcements could be sent to occupied Serbia. It was said that a new Serbian puppet government could largely deal with the insurrection itself. Milan Nedić, former Yugoslav Minister of Army and Navy and Chief of General Staff, was elected to head the new government. He was well known among Serbs as an elite general staff officer of the pre-1918 Serbian and interwar Yugoslav armies, and he had held the two highest military positions in the country. He was regarded as a man of great personal authority, not simply because of his high professional standing, but also because of his commanding behavior in official positions. The Germans were particularly impressed by his reputation as a man of authority. Nedić was also considered fairly reliable since he was known as a believer in German victory and was strong anti-communist. Yet I read that the Germans still had to resort to threats such as arrest. Nedić yielded, and thus he became the leader of the new government of national salvation. The relations between the German occupying authorities and the Nedić government were very strained. Both Himmler and Hitler despised the Serbs. There was a huge disagreement when it came down to the possible release of Yugoslav prisoners of war. One area the Nedić government was successful in was the acceptance of hundreds of thousands Serbian refugees that were either expelled by the German authorities or came fleeing from the NDH, since the Croatian ultranationalists, the Ustaša, hunted down Serbs by the masses. Let's take a look at the different pro-Axis Serbian formations. The Serbian State Guard. Nedić put ex-Yugoslav gendarmerie regiments into a 17,000-strong security force. It was deployed as police as well as frontier guard. In the autumn of 1944, they joined the Chetniks in Bosnia as the 1st Serbia Assault Corps. Around 3,000 of them were sent to Austria by the Germans to work for Organization Todt, the military engineer organization. Others went to Slovenia by the end of the war. They surrendered to the British in Austria. Looking at this photograph, you can see these men wore old Yugoslav uniforms, albeit with new insignia. The Serbian Volunteer Command. In September 1941, the Serbian Volunteer Corps was created from Chetniks and the Zbor movement, the Yugoslav National Movement, which was a Yugoslav fascist organization by Zbor politician Dimitrija Ljotić. This man had no real command over the unit. It had 12 detachments of 120 to 150 soldiers. By 1943, it was a 7,000-strong force under German tactical command, but reported to Nedić. The Germans admired this formation for its performance in combat. In the autumn, they retreated to Slovenia and became a Waffen-SS unit. In May 1945, they surrendered to the British, some of them in Austria, others in Italy. All these men wore former Yugoslav army uniforms and they had dark blue color patches. The Russian Defense Corps. In September 1941, a Russian unit was set up in occupied Serbia, which consisted of Russian former Tsarist officers that fled as white emigres to Serbia after the Russian Revolution and subsequent civil war. Command was held by Boris Stefan, and in September it had around 11,000 men. It had 1 cavalry regiment and 4 infantry regiments. Now, unlike the Serbian Volunteer Corps, this Russian formation was a part of the German army, and its members also took an oath of allegiance to Hitler. The emigres were reinforced by Soviet POWs and had to guard factories in occupied Serbia. In September 1944, they saw action against the Yugoslav partisans near Belgrade. They were then assigned to anti-partisan warfare in Bosnia. I read there were plans to integrate this unit into the ROA, the Russian Liberation Army. I also made a video about that, link in the top right corner, but it never got to that point. On the 10th of October, the unit was renamed to the Russian Corps in Serbia, and they eventually surrendered in May 1945 to the British in Austria. I read that these men adopted German uniforms and wore Russian imperial insignia. Nedić also formed a Serbian labor corps, which counted for 16,000 members in 1942. Then there were also the Chetniks. Now this here is a very broad topic that I will explore in depth in the future. It basically started as a resistance movement, but later joined the Axis against the Yugoslav partisans. In the Banat, there was a 1,500 strong Banat State Guard, also known as the Black Police, which later joined the German Croatian Police. And from April 1941, there was a 6,000 strong SS-style German force that had to guard villages. Most of these units surrendered to the British, either in Austria or in Italy, but were then repatriated to the hands of the Yugoslav partisans. Many of them were shot without a trial. A very interesting aspect of history also we should not forget, and I hope to cover that more in depth in the future. Thanks to my patrons, and a special thanks to Liam Devlin, Damian Wallace, Connor, Philip Jordan, Jakob Musland, Nick Terranova, Haley Mark Littlehill, Janusz Dojinkiewicz, Joanne Justin Trabell, Tanya Dixie, Henry Clarkson, Rob Park, Andrea Martic, Susana Di Bella, John Beach, Luis Peixeira, Fernando Lopez Ojeda, and Mike West. I mentioned the ROA, the Russian Liberation Army. Now, if you want to check a video on that, you can click right here. And if you like to learn about Serbian collaboration with the Germans, I have a video for you. It's right here. Well, thank you for watching. Consider becoming a patron so I can make better, cooler, and more awesome videos for you. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.